we've seen from other teams, though, this definitely requires a very careful approach. We'll see which team is a little more careful, which team takes a little more slowly, or if it is something to where they can actually just jam out those massive pulls.
So it looks like Lethal did, of course, Jack, move past that first ghost at the bottom of the stairs. They don't have any percentage on the counter because the DK did use the control undead on that ghost. As just a ton of time lost, of course, not very efficient to drag it along. Has a lot of casts, so you need to interrupt it. So really good move on them. Friends with Affixes just now moving into that main hallway as well. They'll have to, of course, go downstairs in order to get to that Opera event.
Yeah, I think the Friends of the Affixes have the early death just to distract the ghost and just get by it really quickly for the rest of the team.
I believe so. Yeah, well, they didn't have any percentage either when they were entering the hall, so it seems like they'd certainly skipped it as well. It is just a huge time dump, so I'm not surprised to see that from either team. Lethal now... Friends with Affixes now as well, moving down the stairs. This trash just gives such little percent that it's not, I mean, you see a lot of teams usually kind of sometimes shroud and even invis pot past all of this to go to Opera. Neither team, of course, opting to do that this time. It will be interesting to see, and hopefully we do see it from the teams. We're actually seeing it right now from Lethal, supposedly, where they will go and start that RP for the Opera event because it just takes so long for that curtain to draw so they can actually have access to that first boss.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing you always kind of keep an eye out for, though, is you have to be very, very conscious. And we've seen many guilds or many groups who just use healers and things like that for this, but at the same time, you know, you do just have to grind these mobs down, and you really do just have to ensure that, you know, everyone's staying topped off because it's so easy for everyone to take damage and just go down so quickly. Yeah,
and speaking of going down, we've already had one death over on Friends with Affixes. I mean, it's going to be really tough for these teams not to have a sloppy run. They'll have to play very, very careful. It's just so easy for these mobs to just turn around and one-shot the tank. So many AoE casts. We see Jason Bruce down, going down so low there, so far into heavy stagger as well. They'll have to peer that at 2%, just barely holding on. They'll be moving over to the Opera event shortly. Lethal is still battling through that lower floor, and we should be starting on there. Of course, the Opera event will be the same for both teams.
Yeah, I think you're seeing that Lethal had already procced the Opera event, had already gotten it started, so, and then Friends of Affixes, of course, is just getting there started as well. So you're seeing, you know, Lethal did release that Spirits, that they're able to get it down with the rest of the trash, so Friends of Affixes is getting a little bit of an advantage starting up the Opera event.
Yeah, and Lethal's actually just starting out too, so they started well. They're pretty on par with each other right now. Lethal only 1% up on trash, which is really not that important with how much trash there is in here. We'll see how it breaks down later. Now, of course, the Opera event here that we have is the Beauty and the Beast event, where we have 3 mini bosses active, and of course we do have one that's completely inactive, and you cannot trigger him until you kill the 3 bosses at the start. And it is important to note that once you kill one of the mini-bosses, the other 2 do heal up to full health, so there's not too much to gain out of trying to AoE them down.
Yeah, and you're seeing, I think it was an explosive that was going off a little bit earlier there on Friends of Affixes account. So when you have so many different mob targets and things like that, I mean, you know, right now you're having, for example, the warrior who's just trying to kite out the mob from him and just trying to run away as best as you can. You know, Vimon also just trying to get away from him, getting disoriented there. So, you know, you have to be very, very careful, especially with all the targeting. And seeing, you know, if people are getting disoriented, people are, you know, losing focus there or something like that, you know, missing out on those explosives is just so deadly here.
Of course, they do opt to kill Bablet last, which is that sweeping room. It's quite irritating. It does fixate a player and will disorient them when they reach them, so you constantly have to kite around the area. Friends with Affixes did deem that the other 2 were slightly more threatening, so they decided to kill those. And once Bablet goes down, we will have access to Coggleston, which is that kind of stove top, who will summon some cutlery to slice up the competition.
So Coggle does not want them to be his guest.
No, he does not. Silver forks have indeed spawned. Forks, of course, cannot cut things as efficiently as knives, but they will be there to stab their competition instead. Now, the forks aren't too dangerous, especially in a non-tyrannical setting. However, they do get a damage buff over time, so it is pretty, you know, a good idea, obviously, to kind of passively cleave them down, make sure they don't get too out of hand. He does summon them pretty consistently, and most importantly, we do want to make sure that Coggleston is interrupted.
Yep, and you're seeing right here, they're doing a very good job of making sure they're getting all the forks down and stuff like that. Just kind of getting everything together, cleaving it all down. Jason is really going very, very low here, dropping super low as well as I'm fired up. And they're getting everything down here. It's just very good to be able to drop, you know, the lunar beam and stuff like that, as Lethal has already put a fork in their Cogglestone and is actually moving on, getting a little bit of advantage over Friends of Affixes.
Created a monster. So Lethal going to the backstage now. This is where the trash starts to get a bit hairy, which I wouldn't know about, but they're going to pull some of this backstage trash. We do have to watch out for their casts here. They do AoE stun and nuke players, especially when they're low on health, so they'll have to move out of the explosions when these trash monsters are about to die, and then going downstairs, we're going to see even more threatening trash with those Fireland portal summons.
Yeah, one of the things going backstage and going underneath the stage, you know, as a healer, one of the most scary things is just all of the line of sights, all of the tight corners here, and it really makes it a lot harder. So I like that Friends Affix is actually just pulling out, but even if they're getting the death with the healer down here, and Big Luke also really, really low. I mean, they still haven't even got the res out. It looks like it's just going to be a straight-up wipe here. I mean, Jason's dropping really low. He can't really do much else. All the explosives are going free. It's just a full wipe here for Friends Affix.
I mean, they opted to pull some of those Fireland trash as well and try to LOS upstairs, which is not the worst idea, but keep in mind, I mean, this is bolstering. This is fortified, so mobs are doing a lot of damage and will be doing more damage as you're starting to kill some off, but also explosive. I mean, usually you scoff at the fact that, oh, an orb's easy to kill, and it is easy to kill, but when you're pulling 20, 30 mobs at once, there's a lot of orbs, and you have to spend so much target because for people at home, you cannot AoE down orbs. You have to single target them and kill them, and it just distracts from so much DPS on the group that eventually they'll just whittle you down and kill you.
And that was really what was happening there is, you know, they're getting into a really tight corner, so, you know, they were able to line of sight some of the first explosive orbs, but then you're getting all your different mobs stacked up together. You want to make sure that you're taking them down all together because of bolstering. You want to make sure, I mean, you're seeing right here, for example, many Clarity Wills going out on Janaris. You have very large shields going out on the Blood DK thanks to Amanda here, because all those ads are getting bolstering together. We're about to deal so much damage to them.
So Lethal definitely playing safer and pulling the pack separately, making sure that they don't get too out of hand with the bolstering and, of course, the explosive as well. They're just moving on to the last pack here for the Firelands Portal Summons. Should be able to handle that quite easily, and they'll be moving upstairs to the main stage area in the audience, of course, where they will have to start dealing with those ushers.
Yeah, you're seeing Friends of Affix is still having, you know, a couple deaths here and there. They actually, I believe, used a battle res. If I'm not mistaken, I think they had. Or maybe it was just they had a little bit of time to get set up and stuff like that. So, but yeah, Friends of Affix is still working on the pit crew here and the pit band, making sure they're getting everybody down, whereas Lethal is just moving on. They're moving very quickly here.
It is really effective to have that boomkin here because that AoE beam does help a ton with silencing and force that leg sweep that will be coming up from the Monk later too. So moving on to the ushers here, of course, Lethal will be pulling. I believe there's 6 of them, 7 if you kill the patrol as well. This is a pretty ballsy pull here because of all
pain suppression going out on Genera here.
I'm not even so much,
and barrier.
I'm not even so much worried about the tank. It's really this flashlight spell that's going to cause a ton of damage. They have to make sure to turn around for it. Oof, nuking the warrior pretty low. Luckily, they do manage to kill most of them off before there's any further threat, so good on them there. Tons of warrior coming out from Zeos the warrior.
Yeah, good on Amanda as well for just being able to be so well prepared. I mean, they go into the trash pack, you get a little bit of shielding from Clarity Will, you know, powered shield, and then dropping pain suppression immediately, getting the 40% damage reduction and the big heals that will follow. So very, very good preparation there, as well as dropping barrier in anticipation for those flashlights going off. So, I mean, it was textbook of how you're handling that mob.
Right, you are, and I was just about to say this is the room where they'll need to decide which boss to tackle next. Of course, they could kill any of the 3 bosses in whatever order they'd like. We clearly do know now that they've started pulling the trash towards Maiden, so they will be, as is typical with most groups, going towards Maiden as the second boss. It usually provides the least amount of travel time and the least amount of trash you need to kill, but some groups do opt to go for something like Morose first in order to allow their Bloodlust cooldowns to reset.
You're seeing Lethal, of course, pulling all these mobs back, making sure that they're getting all of them, you know, grouped up together, getting all the explosives, you know, line of sights if they can, and then they're getting all stacked up together. So it's really nice you're seeing Amanda who's running Clarity of Will rather than Shadow Covenant. A lot of times in Mythic, actually Zeos is going down. Oof. Very, very quickly.
Pretty atypical as well from Friends with Affixes in the bottom corner. You know, usually don't pull some of that opera crowd there, so I didn't really get to see it. Might have been an accidental pull or not, but it's pretty atypical, at least from the groups that I'm used to running with or the ones that I do watch on streams. Either way, they do clean those up. Zeos does come up as well now that they've killed the trash, and Lethal will be proceeding into the hall leading up to Maiden Virtue.
And you've seen Friends of Affixes, of course, pulling, you know, very similar pull of all the ushers all together. I think they're just getting all of them in here real quick, so it'll be very interesting to see how they're able to handle it, especially when all the flashlights are going off and there's going to be really, really heavy damage going to be going out on the tank here.
Now, smart on them there. You cannot stun flashlights or interrupt them, but you can displace the mobs. Oh, so much damage going out because of the mobs are bolstered with that flashlight spell. The Monk trying to finish off what he can. Of course, just smacking those orbs. I don't know if he's going to be able to output enough damage. The other mobs, the other members of the team, of course, already releasing to come back, and the Monk will indeed go down as well. Friends with Affixes, their second full wipe of the dungeon. Meanwhile, Lethal still working on some of this trash that divides the 3 bosses.
It's an incredible wipe of Friends of Affixes. I mean, it was looking like they really had it under control. You know, they were going back to back with the Typhoons, the knockbacks and stuff like that, and then just took one bolstered and just completely obliterated the group.
I'm not sure if after this dungeon they're going to be friends much longer, but going downstairs to Morose actually is lethal. So we did comment on this, and this kind of highlights why they were killing some of that extra room in there that we usually don't see. They did decide to go down to Morose first prior to killing Maiden, so they will start clearing some of this dining room area for Morose. Nothing too crazy to say here. You just got to make sure not to pull too many of these Phantom Guests with any of the so-called blueberries on the side because of the bolstering. The Phantom Guests have such lower health compared to those blueberry ads that you can bolster them really high and it could deal a lot of damage to the tank.
Yeah, it's one thing about this instance in particular is that there's so many small mobs that don't really do a lot and don't really have a lot of HP. But when you have any of the, like the blueberries or you're top of the elementals in the corners and stuff like that, you get any of them nearby, they get bolstered, and it's just a world of hurt that goes on you. So very good on pull here. They drop barrier just to be very safe in case any of those bolsters happen and the tank was not able to get out in time. A single hit from, what looks like a really ordinary mob turns into something extremely deadly.
I like how organized they are here too. They killed all the similar health mobs, all those guests, and then they pulled the 3 wardens, the blueberries, if you will, together because those, of course, have similar health as well. They'll be cleaving them down together. We do have a death over from solar power with some of those explosions. You see how dangerous those mobs are with fortified already. Imagine if they had been bolstered by that trash. They'll not be able to res, so they'll be getting these down soon and probably getting ready to pull Morose. We also did see the DK tank control undead on one of those skeletal waiters.
Yeah, and you're seeing here, they're just working their way down. They're making sure they're getting ready together. And of course, there's another wipe at Friends of Affixes still going out.
I mean, this is, we said this before with Rob as well. This is just a rough dungeon. These are just mean affixes.
This is one of the roughest ones.
You definitely have to be really careful in here. I mean, the pressure of it being a race is really connecting with these players. But at the end of the day, this is not a dungeon that you could just recklessly run through. You have to be very careful with what you're pulling. There's so many health differentials with bolstering, fortifying, just making a mess on top of it. And because of the raw mob count that you need for the 100%, there's just so much danger of explosive as well.
One thing to point out here is that we're bolstering explosive fortified, right? Yesterday's broadcast with EU, they were doing this on upper Karhazan, and the difference between Europe doing these affixes on upper versus lower for NA is just so starkly different here. It's just, you have to play so carefully. It's just a very, very long instance you have to be going through. And while it looks like Lethal has, some pretty small, unambitious looking pulls and things like that, it's so good that they're taking their time, and it's really showing in terms of just the death count.
There is a slight difference in the death count indeed. 17 is a greater number than 2 last I checked. Lethal cleaning up the rest of the trash. They've already opened up some of the path to work towards Adaman. They're just pulling these last few guests before what I would assume to be pulling Morose. Of course, Morose is accompanied by 4 of RNG 6 guests. They all have different abilities that you'll have to deal with, and they're just going right in there. No CC at all. Of course, it's not tyrannical, so it's not as dangerous, but these guests do have a lot of abilities that you have to pay attention to. Some you have to interrupt, some will throw whirling weapons, some will charge in whirlwind, and of course if Crispin is in there, I can't really see because I can't read, but if Crispin is in there, there's a huge holy frontal that you need to avoid as well.
Yeah, you see right there, Amanda dropping extremely low. She was the first one to receive that garrote from the boss there. Periodically, Morose will jump to different targets, garrote them, put a huge bleed on them, so it's very, very scary being in this position. I like the way that Amanda first prepared this run where they got Rapture, get all the shields out, gives maximum coverage, shielding, more effective health on everybody possible. And it really, helped out a ton, especially because she was the first one that was getting jumped on and was putting tons and tons of pressure on her right off the bat. As we're going on, it's really a race to make sure that you're getting this boss down because the Morose will periodically just add more bleeds. So right now you have 3 different bleeds going off on targets, and managing those, keeping everyone topped off, is very much a struggle.
Morose does do quite a lot of damage. Of course, he's particularly angry that we have interrupted his dinner service, so he will be dishing out some damage of his own. Most of those guests do go down. Morose should be going down soon. They just have to pay attention to those orbs. We did see some teams in previous weeks that didn't catch sight of these orbs spawning with all these guests kind of charging around on and below this kind of little dinner stage here. So Morose should be going down soon. Meanwhile, Friends with Affixes still working on the trash towards Maiden. They are currently in her room, so they've opted to go on a different, more traditional path, if you will, to pull Maiden as the second boss.
You're seeing here, Lethal just getting Morose down is very, very nice. I mean, it's also very helpful with having the Blood DK around to add a little bit extra leech and a little bit extra healing here and there. So it'll be very interesting seeing, like you were talking about, how Lethal's already going down to Adaman, and while Friends of Affixes is working on Maiden right now.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to pull a bit more trash, which will be used in order to get back to Maiden. If they choose to go back on this path towards her, we'll have to see when they deal with Adaman. After this trash for Lethal, Of course, they will go down to the stable area where Adamin resides. We've definitely already had some more wipes here from friends with Affixes. I don't think it'll lead to a full wipe, though, but just a few more deaths, and of course, that doesn't help. That's another 10 seconds on the timer. Luckily, no full wipe here this time, and they will be ready to pull Maiden here in a moment.
And you're seeing, friends of Affixes just... Part of it just seems like the extra wipes and the extra pulls and stuff like that is just being a little bit too aggressive and not really taking their time here. But also just the preparation you're going into it. I mean, Lethal, for example, when they had a really, really good big pull, for example, on the Ushers, they used all their defensive cooldowns. They used very, very heavy defensive cooldowns to kill everything together, whereas it didn't really seem like Friends of Affixes had that.
So, of course, there's a Holy Bolt here that is usually cast on a ranged player, and it does chain to other ranged players, which is why you see the Boomkin and the Hunter sitting at separate angles away from the boss, not near the melee. The main mechanic on Maiden, for those at home, is that Consecrate debuff that is cast on a player. They run over to the side of the room, will drop it where a large Consecrate pool will grow, and eventually the Maiden will cast a Repentance. Players will need to take damage in order to break that Repentance and chew through her shield that puts up. And if they fail to, well, then they're going to die.
I mean, you're seeing right here, again, I'm Fired Up is running out that extra Consecration room, and, right here you're getting everyone prepped. You're seeing the Hunter moving in range. Everyone's getting closer and closer to make sure that they're able to dip in, take that dot, take that little bit extra damage. So then the Mass Repentance, which is being casted right now, everyone dips in, the Mass Repentance goes out, everyone gets a little incapacitated, the damage they take breaks them out, and then you're working on the shield from Maiden.
Of course, Lethal in the meantime working in Adamin's little horsey world there. Everything seems quite stable, if I do say so myself. So they're finishing off some of those ads. It is important to note, of course, on Adamin that you cannot pull. I mean, you can pull the boss with the trash. However, he will auto aggro everything in that room. Maiden going down very easily. For friends with Affixes, they'll be moving on to likely Morose. In the meantime, we will see Lethal circle back around, making sure they kill the remainder of this trash, because you certainly don't want to pull bolstering trash with the boss by default, and then getting ready to pull Adamin himself.
I really like how Lethal's been, clearing out these trash rooms and things like that. They've been taking their time, but I also think that they're, for an instance like you were talking about that has, you just sneeze and you pull more trash mobs and things like that. Their trash percentage is actually not as high as I thought it would be entering Adamin's room.
No, I mean, there's so much of it, and it just gives such minimal percent. Lethal chewing through, I believe, the second last pack. No, they have two more after this one, prior to Adamin, really hitting the hay down there. They got to make sure not to let these stable hands get their heal off, especially in a bolstering situation. There's none in this pack. There will be some in the later packs here. If they do get a heal off, then it's pretty detrimental, especially in a situation where, let's say, 5 of the mobs are at 10% health. One of them gets healed, you kill 5 of them. Well, guess what? You have a super bolstered mob with high health.
Yep, and you're seeing they're pulling both of them. They're not taking any chances here of just accidentally pulling any of them. Shockwave going down. Many explosives are out there. They're doing a very, very good job cleaning them up. But also, you just have to really, really keep an eye out for these charges from any of the horses going out.
Ton of damage coming in from the Warriors as well, handling the explosives quite well. That beam coming down to prevent that heal that we just spoke about. This should be the last trash pack that they need prior to pulling Adamin, which of course is riding his infamous Mount Midnight. Tons of players would always love that mount. There's an old school mount and of course a new version of that mount. They should be pulling in a moment here.
Yeah, you've seen huge damage like you were talking about from the Warriors. It's really nice being able to, take advantage of those huge trash packs when everyone's got the cleave damage is available to them. And of course, Lethal is engaging with Adamin right now. And you're seeing, first part of the fight, you're having to burn down Midnight. You're having to get the boss down low enough health so that he will dismount. Adamin will fight you toe-to-toe. And the big thing here is just watching out for any of the charges that'll be going out. Of course, you're seeing that Mighty Stomp that's coming out. Dealing a little bit of damage. It's usually not that big of a deal to worry about.
Of course, Adamin, being a particularly cocky mob in here, will be getting off his high horse in a moment, and they will be splitting in two. We will now fight Adamin himself. He does a frontal mortal strike on the tank. Any players caught within it that do successfully get hit will get a 50% max health debuff, including the tank, which is going to prime them in a really poor situation for his big hit coming later on, Shared Fate, which I know you're no stranger to as a healer. It is a huge shadow damage hit split evenly between all players. There are of course, ways the tanks could cheese it or immunity. It looks like he does eat it by himself, the DK. And of course, having a Disc Priest probably helps a lot for that with the pre-shielding.
Yeah, you're definitely taking advantage of the pre-shielding here. You're not seeing Amanda using a lot of Clarity of Will to add more shielding or anything like that. Right now she's getting Raptures out, making sure everyone's staying at a secure level of HP and things like that. So overall, they didn't really have to worry about it too much. We've seen in the past with Demon Hunters and with Brewmaster Monks where they were able to just roll or Fell Rush out of the sweep that was coming out from Adamin there. So luckily, DK just AMS, doesn't even have to worry about it, does tons of healing. Easy game.
So fortunately, of course, without the Tyrannical, because we do have Fortified on this map, they are able to one-phase Adamant. If Midnight does heal to full during the Adamant phase, they would have to repeat phase 1. Once Adamant goes down, and Midnight does get 100% increased damage taken and damage dealt buff, which is pretty easy to handle for the team. They do now an Adamant, but now they have to backtrack entirely, going back up the stairs towards Moroses' area, because they do need to go and kill Maiden now as well.
You're seeing Friends of Affixes, of course, is engaging with Morose, and I believe they did lock down one of the guests.
Two. Looks like 2.
Yes, you're right. As they did lock down a couple of the guests and make sure they don't even have to deal with them. So right now they're just kind of getting into a corner here where they're able to make sure they're able to keep an eye on all the fell explosives. They're able to have, basically everything in front of them, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of keep an eye on there. So, right now they only have 2 of the dots of the Garotes that are coming out. Actually, sorry, they have 3 of them that are out right now. So one of them's on the tank, so it's a lot easier to mitigate here. But some of the weeks doing this on like green.
And I hope that I saw that one of the mobs on the side did indeed break out. It is taunted, and we see a ton of those special delivery kegs popping up from Jason Brew's one of the Brew talents. Morose does actually break his mobs out at a certain percentage. However, things like Hunter Trap, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Priest Shackle do permanently CC them for the entire fight, so they definitely have a nice advantage there, having the Hunter in because of the perma freeze from their trap. Lethal, in the meantime, pulling a ton of this room, trying to grind their way back to Maiden. Still a lot of trash to have to clear. Likely they're going to overkill trash. Shouldn't be too much of a concern for them. As soon as they get Maiden, they will have completed the map, so we'll have to see how Friends with Affixes deals with that. They've already killed Maiden. Morose is about to go down, but then have to go downstairs to Adamant's room again and clear that entire stable area prior to engaging the last boss.
They have tons and tons of trash that they need to be clearing out, and they need to be making some very, very aggressive pulls. Friends of the Affixes here to be able to kind of catch up, because right now Lethal's got a very small trash percentage left, which they will easily get just going down this hallway to begin with, and then all they have to do is face off against Maiden, and then they're set.
Yeah, so Friends with Affixes now starting to pull some of that remaining trash before they can go down to Adamant's stable area. Keep in mind, there's also a 17 death differential between the 2 teams. I mean, Friends with Affixes is going to have to make huge pulls in this room. No horsing around at all. Moving towards Maiden now is Team Lethal. They only have, it depends how much of the trash in this hall they decide to pull at once, but at the end of the hall we can see from this nice camera angle is Maiden, so they only really have about at max 4 pulls if they pull really slowly too. I doubt they'll do that. They'll probably be fairly aggressive and pull around the corner, LOSing any orbs into Maiden's room, as we saw Friends with Affixes do earlier.
And you're even seeing that, Friends with Affixes, when they were doing that similar pull there, they really didn't even have that much in the way of any kind of problems. It actually looks like they might be invising this.
Looks like it is.
Yeah, so it looks like they're just invising it. They don't even have to worry about it here. So yeah, they're just invising it, going right by. There's no real point to having any of the extra risk and stuff like that. And this is the last boss that they need.
It is the last boss, yep. So they're getting ready to engage Maiden. Of course, we did see her mechanics earlier. As long as they play it safe, make sure they take the damage from that Sacred Ground, consecrate that players are debuffed with, and Dolph in the corner for her Repentance. They should be just fine. I mean, Friends with Affixes is so behind now. They can't just pull, they can't do a huge move and try to pull Adamant with all that trash. It is bolstering. It's just not going to work. I just don't see any way Lethal is going to lose this map at this point.
And you're seeing Friends of Affixes just horsing around in the stables, just trying to get as many mobs down as they possibly can here. I mean, at this point, all they have to be doing here is just some kind of aggressive pull to catch up.
They can't, though. I mean, bolstering just locks you down so much. As much as you just want to pull that entire room, let's say play it well, LOS, line of sight, those explosive orbs, ultimately you will just not perfectly kill everything and interrupt all of those heals to properly deal with bolstering. You just have to break up your pulls. Bolstering is such a restrictive affix.
And you're even seeing the explosives as well. The fact that you have to devote extra time from AoEing all the mobs down, from focusing, certain targets to stun them, knock them back, or anything like that. You have to worry about all the all the explosives, especially the more mobs that you're pulling in. Definitely very well played by Lethal here. Much less deaths, a way better route, exact percentage that they needed.
I'm not actually so convinced about the route. I mean, they overkilled a lot of trash and had to invis-pot back down the hallway. Going to Morose first is more effective, of course, for allowing your Sated or Bloodlust or Heroism debuffs to come back up. But ultimately, there's just so much extra trash you have to deal with, and they have to use that invis-pot. Nonetheless, whatever strat they may have chosen, it was an extremely clean run for them. Only 2 deaths, and they're going to claim game 1.
Yeah, well played there by Lethal. And, we said coming into this, you kind of have to, there's the argument of brinksmanship, but you have to stay alive, right? You can't just be sitting there dying all the time. And we saw Lethal take some smaller pulls at points, just respecting the affixes and just saying, okay, we think we can just take this if we go a little bit slower. And Friends with Affixes really struggled with that, as we expected.